Satvik Sethi, right?
Yeah,
Sethi? Am I saying it
yeah.
right? Okay. Okay, well, Satvik, I'm so excited to have you back on Rehash. We haven't heard from you since all the way back in season 3, episode 12. Was this 2 years ago? Let me look back. I should have had this pulled up. This was from December of 2022. So it's been almost 2 entire years since we had you on the podcast. And like so much has changed. So I mean, I guess like before we dive into offline, I would love to get a little update from you. I know last time we chatted on season 3, episode 12, we talked a lot about mental health and Web3. And back then you were working on Join Circle. So I'd love to hear how is your mental health and what has happened with Join Circle since 2022.
For sure, yeah. First of all, thank you so much for having me back. I'm super stoked about this. Yeah, it's crazy that it's been 2 years. Honestly, I didn't realize it's been that long.
Yeah.
Um, I think so for us, Join Circle definitely went through a few iterations. That was also end of 22 was when I was deciding to resign from my role at MasterCard. That kind of went through in February of last year. And since then, Join Circle ended up pivoting to Anoka, which was we were trying to build a positivity for a social media platform. Build out for about 6 months until the end of last year. And we were fully bootstrapped, kind of just, got to the end of our bootstrap runway and kind of got this golden parachute where this company wanted to acquire the tech that we'd built out. So ended up parting ways with Anoka in January of this year, and since then been on this completely new journey.
Yeah, and so offline has been built. You guys have been building in stealth until recently, right?
Yeah, so it was about, April 1st was actually when I announced the light paper. What a great day to announce because a lot of
Yeah.
people were wondering if this was a joke or if this is something real. But since then, yeah, it was about a few months of research, just trying to figure out, how offline networks can be built, how we can proliferate some of the work that we want to do. And then since then, it's been about 2 months of just core building with a very small team, but we're all super excited about it.
I have so many questions for you. The first time I remember when you hit me up about offline, I was just thinking, how is all of this possible offline? Because a lot of the things that you guys are trying to do are things that people typically think of doing online. And I still don't even fully know how it's possible to do all of this offline. So I'm really glad I have you today so we can dive deep into that. But I think a good place to start with offline is actually how you came up with the idea for it and talk a little bit about sort of like the mission behind it because it is a very mission driven project that you're working on.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, there's a few different catalysts, throughout my life. There have been several experiences. I think I touched on this briefly during our last kind of podcast recording as well. But I've always been very driven by just things happening in the world. Social impact to me has been always really close to my heart. And personally, just, being an immigrant when I was in the US, there was a lot of times when I ran into issues with centralized banking systems, not having the social security number, and being kind of outcasted from certain opportunities and certain kind of accessibility situations. So that was definitely one. But I think the core catalyst for offline protocol was really in 2022 when Andrew and a couple of friends and I co-founded Relief, where we were raising that money for charities in Ukraine when the war started. And it was at that time when I received this story in my DMs of a family that was at a bus shelter and they were trying to flee the country to get to Poland. So there were these buses that were leaving pretty regularly. And at the time, MasterCard, Visa, Amex had turned off their payment rails in the network because Ukraine, Russia, that whole region was
Right.
sanctioned. So even when people had money in their bank accounts, they couldn't use that money. And similarly, we always say cryptocurrency censorship resistant, but at the time there was no internet, there was no telecom services, there was no electricity in a lot of these places. So even their crypto wasn't working. So despite having money in both ways, they were unable to actually pay the bus driver to leave the country. They had to wait a day, find shelter, and then somehow manage to flee the next day. And that was the first time that it kind of challenged my own personal beliefs and my bullishness on crypto as a censorship resistant kind of alternative. And so that's when I started looking into alternate methods. I started digging into what's been done previously in the crypto industry. A few people in the Bitcoin community had built some really interesting solutions back in the day. The Dogecoin community has built something to do with radio payments back in the day. And it was really kind of looking at those use cases where, the gears in my head started to churn, and I was like, okay, we could do something. But ultimately, it just ended up being a draft sitting in my notes forever, until this year when I really saw, again, we were seeing a lot happening in the Middle East. We were seeing a ton of natural disasters taking place around the world, and not just Middle East. This year, there have been internet blackouts in Bangladesh and Venezuela, and we're starting to see more of that come up. And so, really, I had these ecosystem lead offers in my hand from different L1s and L2s, and I was kind of sitting, mulling them over, seeing which one I want to choose. But just seeing kind of what was happening on the news, something in me said, let's say no to these offers. And so, 24th March, 2 days before my birthday, I turned down the offers I had, celebrated my birthday, and 1st April, I announced offline protocol.
That's an incredible story. I feel like you're a founder at heart too. Like I know some people that they're just founders, and they just it's hard for them to go and work at a company and be an employee because they just always have that itch. Like their brain is full of ideas and they always have that itch to just like start their own thing and build from the ground up, and that's such a different experience than being an employee at a company. And I feel like you're one of those people that you're just like a founder. Like you have that like founder DNA and that's what you have to do.
I'm hoping that's a compliment, but yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I literally got that whiteboard in the back, like just spontaneously, because my mind was just running at 100 miles an hour, and I just had to like put things down. So yeah,
Totally.
I feel like I've always kind of had that inclination.
Yeah, totally. No, I can 100% relate to that. And I'm saying this fully as a compliment to you. So let's dive a little bit into offline. So I guess the place to start, understanding this vision of seeing everybody struggle with payments, with basic things like that. And a lot of that is due to the fact that they don't have internet and they can't be online. So, how are we able to let people do all of these things, make payments, all of these things without being online and still help them be as connected as they would be if they were online?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, for me, when these kind of catalysts came up, the first thing I did was just research what exists out there.
Mhm.
And my whole goal behind offline protocol was to build more resilient alternatives to traditional networks. And so I looked at, throughout my research, I looked at a lot of different options. People can use radio and radio frequencies to relay messages. The more common ones are Bluetooth. There is something called Wi-Fi Direct, where instead of devices connecting to a central router, the devices themselves become a router that other devices can connect to. So there's a lot of ways that you have the NFCs that friends like Winnie at Chips are using. You have RFID. So there's many different ways which you can proliferate information offline. But for offline protocols specifically, what we're doing is a mix of Bluetooth mesh as well as Wi-Fi Direct. So typically, if you look at the existing industry around offline apps, most of them either support Bluetooth mesh or they support Wi-Fi Direct. So we'll be one of the first kind of infrastructures on the market that are able to support both. And what's cool is we're also building something interesting that allows us to automatically detect the best way possible between the two to actually be able to share those messages out. So it's something that we're calling the dynamic offline relay switch. So that's what we're implementing throughout the infrastructure that's going to be going into the apps that we're building on top of it.
And what is Bluetooth mesh and Wi-Fi direct? Just to break it down and explain how those two things work.
Sure. Yeah. So I mean, Bluetooth mesh is simply, all our smartphones, all these devices have Bluetooth capabilities inbuilt. And so Bluetooth mesh is just a way to use the inbuilt Bluetooth capabilities to connect with other devices. So I don't know if you did this back in the day, but like growing up in India, the best way for file sharing for a lot of us when we had our, Blackberries or Nokias used to be Bluetooth. So if one friend got a new song, a new music video or something, we'd
Mhm.
all be using Bluetooth to share files with each other. So it's just that same concept. But in a mesh situation, it basically just allows multiple devices to create a network together using all their inbuilt Bluetooth capabilities. And Wi-Fi Direct is so where Bluetooth mesh, you could essentially connect many to many devices. With Wi-Fi Direct, it's just many devices connecting to one device as that central hub, similar to how in a Wi-Fi you connect to one central hub for the internet. In Wi-Fi Direct, you connect to one central device. So say you're going to like Coachella with your friends, your device can become that central hub, and then all your friends can connect to you. And so even if your friends want to message each other, it would actually pass through your device versus in Bluetooth mesh, they could directly go communicate with each other without a central relayer.
And Wi-Fi Direct works offline as well. You don't need
Yeah.
internet connection to use Wi-Fi Direct.
Yeah, so there's no internet or telecom required for either of them. They're purely P2P in essence.
Gotcha. Have we seen any implementations of so like, I think Bluetooth mesh is maybe a little easier to understand because we still, like airdrop things to ourselves or to each other all the time. But what are some implementations of Wi-Fi Direct that like do we use that in our day-to-day yet?
I wouldn't say we necessarily use it in our day-to-day as much, but there are definitely been apps and attempts that specifically use Wi-Fi Direct to share messages. A great example of that actually that most people don't even know is Signal. So Signal, the messaging app, while they have their whole kind of normal messaging app component, they also have an offline mode that actually uses Wi-Fi Direct. So that also is offered, as an optionality failsafe, but I don't think commonly Wi-Fi Direct as well adopted. But the good thing about Wi-Fi Direct is that it almost doubles the range that Bluetooth Mesh offers you. So it's with Wi-Fi Direct you can get ranges up to 200 meters unobstructed, whereas with Bluetooth it's up to 100 meters unobstructed.
Oh wow. Okay, gotcha, gotcha. So, okay, so then walk me through how you have decided to implement these two things into offline protocol. I know payments is a big part of what you guys do, and then I think, communication is as well, maybe information sharing. Um, uh, yeah, walk us through how you've implemented these in offline.
Sure. Yeah. So for offline protocol, we're a stack of three different things. So at the base, kind of fundamental layer is the offline networking infrastructure, which is this mix of Bluetooth mesh and Wi-Fi direct. So we're just creating that infrastructure that can support offline networking in any apps, right? On top of that, we're building our own app layer as the second component of offline protocol. Within the app layer, we have three apps. The first one is Fernweh, which is the German word for homesickness for a home you've never been to. And I really kind of liken that to that whole aspect of connecting with people, and being in places where you maybe weren't expecting yourself to be, situations you weren't expecting yourself to be. And so it's essentially an offline messaging app where you can connect with your friends, you can connect with strangers. So whether you're at a music festival, sporting event, or even for people in developing countries that don't have access to traditional means of communication, they could also use that. Our second app is the payments app, which is called Offline Pay. So basically, it's a really interesting kind of new sort of wallet where you essentially would on ramp with crypto or your bank account and collateralize your money one to one, and then use offline dollars essentially to transact completely offline within these networks that you're creating. And then the final component that we're looking at is Diffuse, which is our information sharing app. So I liken that more to something like a citizen app, if you're familiar,
Mm-hmm.
but
Yeah.
essentially sharing, things like Amber Alerts, emergency alerts, being able to share kind of real-time news, real-time updates, and it's really important to have something like this for disaster relief, for kind of these critical use cases where, having access to immediate information becomes vital.
Do you see these apps being used primarily by people in, emergency or disaster areas, or do you see people using this in any situation, like even, kids going to Coachella, and in like different situations like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's interesting because I've been having this conversation a lot lately because when I started working on offline protocol, I was really looking at it from a very myopic view of wars, natural disasters,
Hmm.
fringe use cases where it was more a need than a desire or a good thing to have. But then I spent the summer traveling around Europe and I met a lot of people that had nothing to do with crypto or tech. And just talking to them about offline protocol, it was amazing. At at a dinner table, people started sharing their own experiences, saying, "Oh, this would have been really helpful at this sporting event, or this would have been really helpful at this music festival." And I myself got lost at the Berlin Pride Parade, where they said there were about 1 million people, and the traditional networks just did not work. And so the next day I'm like, wow, offline protocol could have really fixed this. And so I came back from that trip kind of with this new perspective on the amount of use cases that we can enable. And so now we're kind of splitting our GTM, and we're really looking to partner with humanitarian organizations, NGO networks, to be able to serve as those power users in developing countries that maybe don't have access to telecom and internet networks. They might be unbanked right now. They might be digitally disconnected. So we can serve them as well as people in situations of war and natural disasters, because for them it's a need, right? They need this to exist for them. But then we also at the same time want this to be available to, like you said, young people at college campuses. We want this to be available to people that are traveling around the world, going to all these like fun experiences with their friends. And so we're really splitting kind of how we approach the market. But what's great for us is that we don't have to tweak the products to specific use cases. The same products can be applied to countless different kind of environments and the way that people want to use them.
Yeah, absolutely. I could even see it as like that fun layer of use cases. You could use that to get traction and to get visibility and to like generate hype around offline so that these nonprofits and these like really meaningful organizations that are helping people in big ways will take notice of offline, like will see offline, like see all these people using it and then realize, wait, like we can make so much more impact with offline than these kids at Coachella are using to like connect with their friends while there's no cell service or something. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. But no, 100%, I completely agree because, I look at that market as I call them high virality and high growth users because they'll help us get the brand name out there. I really want offline protocol to become a household name in this space. But at the same time, like you said, just through stuff I've been posting on social media, we've now started to see more of these humanitarian organizations or more impact driven organizations just discover us through this way and reach out. Like last week, one of the world's largest agri-tech startups reached out to me because they wanted us to work with their community of small grow farmers in remote regions that typically don't have access to any payment ecosystems, right? So they're unable to accept payments for their smallhold farms. And so offline protocol can help them accept payments and be able to sell their crop, get information about all the kind of current market prices and things of that sort. So yeah, we're starting to see kind of new use cases emerge every single day right now.
That's not even something that came to mind at all for me until
Same.
you just said that. Like, I feel like that's so niche, but it's also like a really big population of people too, because there's so many farmers and there's so many areas, at least like in the US, that rely on kind of these like farmers and farmers markets to get their groceries, like outside of major cities, pretty much everywhere. So I can see how that can be actually a really big use case as well. So outside of the apps that you guys have already started building on top of offline, what are some of the most impactful apps you can think of that you would like people to come build on top of offline? And are developers able to come build on offline yet?
Sure. Yeah. Great question. So not right now. I think we're a super small bootstrap team, so we're very focused on just shipping our own app layer right now. But eventually, we do kind of want to create our own SDK that can enable this offline infrastructure for other developers. And I feel like with our three apps, we've covered the bases of what's possible, and like it's a great way to showcase examples of what can be built, what use cases can be solved for. But I think it'd be cool to see eventually, once the SDK goes live for other developers, to see more very kind of hyper specific niche use cases being created, right? Because again, we're making very generalist apps right now. So we have this generalist messaging, generalist payments. But I think over time, I do want to see more special use cases for particular communities, right? So it'd be lovely to see developers from a particular community creating a product using offline protocol that serves their own community. And I think those are kind of these hyper local use cases that we can enable through offline protocol, which would be just amazing to see that. I want this to like really solve real world problems. I know we say that a lot in crypto, but I feel like this really has the potential to make that happen.
I am totally with you on that. I know that there's something else called offline oracles. Is that a separate thing, or how is that related to offline protocol?
Yeah, so offline oracles really was like when we were still working on, getting offline protocol out there, we were trying to see what else we can do to engage the community, to explore the ecosystem, think through different kind of social graphs, different, ways to bring community together. And so that's when we launched Oracle Social, which is this social platform kind of Tumblr on chain that we built using Lens as the social graph. And so there was a lot of great learning from that whole experience because we saw how to proliferate, social logins. We're now using some of those lessons to build our own social graph that's powering the offline protocol usernames. So that for us was really this like just experiment, and we're still kind of tinkering around with it every now and then. But right now, again, just given the status of the team, we're very, very focused narrowly on just getting offline protocol products out there.
Yeah, I think this might be related to offline oracles, but we had a question on Twitter from Kakator, who said, "What is the purpose of the UGC news feature in offline protocol?"
Sure, yeah, so the UGC News is the Diffuse app that I was talking about earlier.
Gotcha.
So user generated content basically, and a big reason why I actually wanted Diffuse to exist as one of the apps within the offline protocol ecosystem is because I remember earlier this year when the situation in Gaza was kind of starting to be all over our social media feeds. Some of the most viral videos that people were saying are coming out of Gaza were later fact checked to be videos from Syria from a few
Mm.
years ago, right? And they were being shared like anything on social media because false news statistically spreads like 6 times faster or something. And so that kind of got me thinking of how we can ascribe certain elements of metadata to content that's being shared. And so what's great about offline protocol is that we're so hyper local in how content's being kind of brought to the surface that we can then through diffuse assign certain types of metadata to all pieces of content being shared. And so we have this inbuilt kind of verification and authenticity that's being added to the content. So that's kind of the whole piece behind that UGC and information sharing and diffuse.
Yeah, can you talk any more about how that works behind the scenes? Like, because I'm sure a lot of people would be curious to know, like, how are you able to ensure that the content they're being fed through Diffuse is in fact checked and verified? Like, how is it fact checked and verified so that they can have more peace of mind knowing that it's, real and not fake news?
Yeah, so with the offline protocol usernames that we recently launched, essentially there's different things that we're adding to your username, sort of like your social graph, right? So we're looking at your IP address, your device address, the kind of offline connections that you're making, and all these things help us describe a certain region that you're part of an offline network in this hyper-specific region, right? So when you're sharing content, we're then meta tagging all these different things that we know about you and your offline region as part of that content. So now if you're taking a photo in Florida and saying, oh, this is, Singapore, we now know that this photo originated in this like offline network in Florida. So we can then say, okay, this is where it's originated from. Here's the metadata to go with it. So we can confidently say this was not from Singapore, right? So that's how we're thinking about that piece. And obviously, with offline networks, there's a lot of limitations around the size of data we can share. So we can't enable videos, for example, but even just with text, basic kind of light compressed images, those are some of the ways that we're hoping to use diffuse. And again, more than anything else, we're really wanting diffuse to be this like emergency alerts, Amber Alerts type of system where we're building in broadcast features, we're building in reputation systems, cooldown features to prevent misuse, but really, you could use it to alert people of what's happening around you at all times.
Yeah, reputation is something that I've been thinking about a lot recently and talking to a lot of people about. And I think, that's become a big thing people are thinking about because that really is the underlying issue that we need to solve for in order to accomplish, like, do a lot of the things that we want to do in order, to for diffuse to work as it should. There needs to be some sort of reputation system behind it so that in case somebody does get past the metadata and whatever you have built in and share some fake news, that there's a way to slash them or to indicate that they're this person is not trustworthy, and we gotta like we have to be careful with what they post in the future and things like that.
Yeah, no, 100%. I think what's great about offline networks is that, in essence, they're decentralized by nature because these networks can't really exist until there's many different nodes becoming a part of this,
Right.
right? And so, to some degree, we have this inbuilt kind of consensus and reputation system that's easy to bring to life as part of these networks. Versus if it's something online, you have one person, one part of the world, one person in another part of the world. So it's not decentralized by default. So even without it being like a crypto-centric product out of the gates, we're still decentralized in essence in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah. Are you talking about offline in the context of crypto at all, by the way, or do you not even mention crypto when you talk about offline?
As of now, we don't mention crypto, but that's also very deliberate because there is no crypto at the start of offline protocol, right? So I'm kind of taking a very contrarian bet in how we're building offline protocol out, especially in our space where people start from day zero with crypto economic incentives and use that as a lever to bring users in. My goal as kind of the non-technical founder is to just see how far we can push user acquisition without any sort of crypto economic incentives at the gate and try to really showcase the product for the value proposition that it boasts, right? Because it does solve a very real problem that a lot of people face, and so I want that to be the main talking point. That said, eventually, sure, we'll introduce different sorts of incentives into the network. We do want people to feel a sense of loyalty. We want people to feel a sense of belonging to offline protocol, and it'll help us bootstrap more and more offline networks around the world. But for now, this is really just seeing if we can showcase to people that they need this and just get them in that way.
Yeah, what's the best way that people can get involved? Like maybe I don't have a specific need. I'm not going to a large event with my friends where, I'm going to need this or I'm not in a disaster area, but what for somebody like me, like what's the best thing I can do now just so I have this set up for, when I do actually need it?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the simplest thing you could do right now is just get an offline protocol username. That's kind of like the foundational block of everything that's going to come in the future. So id.offlineprotocol.com. Use code revolution if you want 100% off your username order.
Oh, amazing.
Yeah, but essentially that's the foundational block, right? Everything that comes after the entire ecosystem of apps, it's all tied to that foundational username that you'll have. And we want to make sure that as we continue building offline protocol as an ecosystem, we're also constantly thinking of ways where we can support that username even in different ecosystems, right? So maybe we do see a future one day where it becomes as imminent as an ENS name that you see anytime you log into anything on chain, your ENS kind of pre-populates. My real hope is like we can get these dot offline off-chain usernames in a similar capacity across ecosystems.
Last question for you. This is from Paloma on Twitter. Paloma wants to know how to get offline merch. And I see that you're wearing a piece of offline merch. And I'm also curious how to get
Yeah,
offline
for sure.
merch.
Yeah, I mean, I love this. Like, I've always wanted to do merch design, and so with offline protocol, I've really let loose, and I love like half my wardrobe now is just offline protocol clothes.
Love it.
So we're kind of like doing this more community centric. I'm never gonna sell merch, at least for now. Like, I just want to be able to give merch out to anyone that wants it. So, we have this like community program that you can sign up for. There's a link in our Telegram group that you can find online. But basically, anyone that's just engaging with us on socials, anyone that meets me at events, I'm always carrying stickers, I'm always carrying t-shirts. So literally just find me at events and I'm happy to give you merch. And then for all our international friends that can't make it to events, just reach out to me. Like, I think there's no bigger honor as a founder than people wanting to rep what you're building. So I don't want to like, monetize off of this. I'm happy if you want to be ambassadors for us and wear our merch everywhere you go.
I love it. What events will you be at for the remainder of the year?
Oh, DEF CON. That's like hopefully the last one that I have to go to. I'm
Yeah.
like exhausted from events, as privileged as that sounds, but it's been great at the same time because I think offline protocol has definitely been one of these things where it's hard sometimes to showcase the value proposition just by talking about it on Twitter. But every single person that I've met, even in Singapore, 2 weeks ago, which was the first time I was really publicly showcasing offline, everyone instantly resonated, and it was amazing to see the response that people had. So yeah, DevCon's the next one. I'm gonna be all around. We're also co-hosting an event with Luxo, Dora, Shifi, and FWB, where we're all going to meet Mudeng, the biggest internet celebrity right now. So definitely register for that. Let me know if you do so I can approve you. And we're taking buses, going to meet this internet
Oh,
star. And
wow.
we're going to be offline touching grass. So hopefully I'll see some of you there.
Oh wow, the real Mudane. I was gonna
Yeah,
ask,
the
like,
real
what are
Mudeng.
we literally Mudane? Okay, the real Mudane. Well, definitely send me all of those links. Send me the link to your Telegram group, to the DevCon events, so I can link those in the show notes and share it with the Rehash community as well. And we will also be at DevCon, and we'll have our own little Rehash house. So would love to bring you by and have you come by and show people offline IRL.
Yeah, let's do it, and I'll make sure to bring merch for everyone. Just send me a head count, so we'll
Amazing.
make it happen. Yeah.
You rock. You're the best. Where can people find you and where can people follow offline?
At offline protocol everywhere. Don't want to show myself. Just go engage with offline and go grab yourself a username at id.offlineprotocol.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming back on Rehash and telling us all about offline. Everyone, go check out offline. We'll link everything in the show notes to make it easy to click through. And I will see you in Thailand very soon.
Let's go. Thank you, Diana, for having me again.
Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.